Hi, I'm Mandy Napier and my business is Mindset for Success. And I'm about to be on the Online Prosperity Show. And I'm super excited. I'm going to take you on a journey from some of my travels and adventures through the world and my downfalls that led me to today, having had my business for 18 years as a high performance mindset coach, where I help entrepreneurs, athletes, and professionals clear their limiting blocks and step up to the next level to create great performances and live happier, healthier lives.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show, your premium destination for exclusive insights from leading experts in their field. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and today you're in for a treat. Our guest today is the remarkable Mandy Napier. Now, Mandy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, thank you, Prosper. It's a real pleasure to be with you today.
Yeah. Oh, don't you mention, the pleasure is all mine. I was reading your resume and your life story reads like an adventure novel. And I just can't wait to share you with our audience today. So yeah, and for those that are watching, thank you so much for tuning into the Online Prosperity Show. And for sure, I did mention it does read like an adventure novel. So she has actually done solo hitchhiking through Africa and has represented Australia in ultra distance triathlons, including the one that was the gruelingHawaiian Ironman World Championships. And if that's anything to go by, she has actually left all that and she has swapped her backpack for, a business bag, where she's now helping people to rewire their brain and create better habits and behaviors so they can achieve their goals and fulfill their potential. So it's one of those pleasures to find somebody who's as accomplished as yourself, having done all of those things that anyone would have given up, but you were there, you saw it through. So I can't wait to unpack all of that, and share what you have done for others. So from navigating the unpredictable terrains of the Sahara to now charting the complexities of the human mind, she's actually transformed her passion for exploration into a mission to help others achieve peak performance. And as the founder of Mindset for Success, Mandy has spent over 19 years empowering entrepreneurs, leaders, and athletes to break through limitations that stop them in their tracks, and so they can realize their full potential. So in this episode, we're going to dive into Mandy's fascinating journey from her early adventures and career transitions to now the transformative work that she's doing today. And we're also celebrating the manuscript of her new book, and she's going to be talking about that shortly. And we just really going to be looking at all the highlights and really looking forward to the essence of resilience and determination that she brings to the table. So whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned professional, or someone that's just seeking inspiration to overcome your own personal hurdles, I want you to stay tuned, because I think this conversation promises to be both engaging and entertaining, and is also offering lessons that you probably would never be able to find anywhere else. Now, Mandy, I could go on and talk about the adventures as if I'm the one that lived them. You might as well help us out here. One of your early adventures includes solo hiking throughout Africa. Where did you go?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I did a lot of other travels before that. And I ran into someone who kept telling me I must go to Africa. So the easiest way, way back then, I wanted to get a Land Rover, but it was too expensive and there was no one else that wanted to do it. So I actually went on an overland trip first from London to Nairobi, which was an interesting experience. I hopped off in Nairobi and I persuaded somebody that we should, after climbing Mount Kenya, we should hitchhike to Tanzania and go to the Serengeti and have a look at the animals, as you do in your 20s. So we had a little adventure there, and then he had to go back to New Zealand. So I was left in Tanzania with the options of how do I go south through Malawi and get to Zimbabwe on my own, and there isn't a lot of public transport. So I was very careful about the rides, but yeah, I hitchhiked through Tanzania. I went to Malawi, which was fabulous. I went through Zambia and I ended up in Zimbabwe because in those days I thought I might find a teaching job out in the bush. That's what I actually wanted to do then. So it was partly necessity and partly my adventurous spirit, I think, that I've always had, a little bit of stubbornness to do what I want to do and no one will stop me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, what you just said there, I mean, obviously, sort of is part of your journey and everything else, but wanting to teach in Africa, I don't know if you know any of my journey. I actually met an Australian teacher that came to our school. So that could have been you for some other kid as well, and things of that nature. What was the inspiration to want to teach in Africa?
I think I'd done a degree back in the UK, back in England, and I worked out for a year and I really enjoyed that the most, actually working out and doing something useful, not just studying. And I met people who'd done a lot of different jobs and volunteering. And I think in my 20s, I think I thought it would be a good idea. I think with my traveling spirit and adventures, I thought maybe I could make a small difference and bring my skills, not knowing much about where to get going. However, when I got to Zimbabwe, the reality is you had to go back to England to apply. So I didn't actually ever, that one never came to fruition. But it was an idea at the time that I was going to explore. Yeah.
Absolutely. You would have been able to influence a kid or two to be doing have a happier existence, because when we had an Australian teacher come through, I was about 13 years old, and she taught us quite a lot of stuff. And I actually started improving my English because I wanted to be able to communicate with her. And in the process of doing that, she just really inspired me a lot. And as she was leaving, she told each and every one of us that if ever we're in Melbourne, to give her a call and we can have a cuppa. And to the other kids, that was a goodbye message, but I took that as a mandate. So you would have been amazing. Able to. Yes,
I saw your story actually, and of meeting your teacher. They tracked her down. It was incredible. I think in those days, I don't think I had such a thought that I would be able to be a great inspiration. I imagined that I would be able to do something. Anyway, that I had to wait in my journey. That had to wait till a little bit later on in my life.
Absolutely. Now, I don't know. You called the transportation that you took from England to Nairobi an overland truck. Did the people that were on that same transportation call it anything different? Because I've heard it being called a bus, and it creates such controversy around,
I think it had many names depending on the people on board and how they got on, but ours was definitely a truck. It was a great big MAN, a man truck, not a Bedford or a company called Dragoman who have more like a bus. It absolutely was a truck because we had to dig it out of the mud in Zaire at different times. Truck was what I remember, and it might have had other names from other people at different times. A beast, I think, when it broke down.
Absolutely. Now, what were some of the highlights in your travels, and things that you obviously might have taken with you that are now influencing the kind of work that you're doing today?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the first highlights was going through the Sahara, just the massive open space. And when we're in such wilderness areas, we really seem to connect with the essence of us. You have a lot of clarity about life in many ways. So I think nature is one of the most powerful sources of healing and the greatest gifts we can give ourselves. And then probably Zaire was an awesome experience, but I think the one that was most defining was I spent some time in Lake Malawi for about a week, and I just spent time with the kids in Malawi, and it was just so wonderful. They spoke a little bit of English, but just to play with them in such an innocent fashion, to laugh, to communicate. They would build incredible toys and gadgets out of waste that other people see as wasteful. And I met some of their family in the village, and they didn't have much, but they were so happy. They danced, and African music, beautiful. And that was such an insight, that how can people with not much be so happy? And then when I hitchhiked through Zambia, I spent some time with people that work for the Red Cross and the United Nations, etc. And I stayed with them, and they were all highly stressed and drank a lot of alcohol. And I just thought, they would drive nice cars and had highly paid jobs, yet some of them were very stressed and not happy. Yet there were people with not much that were just so happy and joyful. And I'll never forget that. It reminded me that we have a choice how we show up in our life and how we make the most of our circumstances. And I think there's a big lesson for so many people in our busy lives that could take so much away from that.
Absolutely. And the one thing about what you're saying is, if you tell that to somebody else who hasn't experienced it, it's very difficult for them to grasp, because they think you need all the creature comforts that we have managed to trap ourselves into. Yet those kids will be running around, Muzungu, Muzungu. And, that made their day, having seen somebody different. And that also just really showcases to them that there's life out there, and maybe one day I might amount to something. So I'm glad that is the perspective that you saw. And you're absolutely right as well about we call them expats, or the people that work in NGOs. They have the latest 4x4s and everything else, but yes, they seem to not be even enjoying the positions that they were in, and things of that nature. But obviously Africa was not the only stop that you had. You also trekked the Himalayas with less than ideal gear. What was going on there, Mandy?
Well, we did some crazy adventures. I met an Australian girl, and Australians are always adventurous, and I'm from England originally. And we went to the Himalayas first, but we both got really sick, so we never did a trek. So we pledged we'd meet back there a year later and do a big trek. And this is after having gone overland from England as far as we could to Australia. So when we went back to Nepal, everyone said there's this great trek. It's 3 weeks and it goes over a huge pass, which is about 4,500 meters. So off we set, and we had done no research. I'm sure it would almost be embarrassing, but I laugh at myself now. We were in our 20s. We had training shoes, no proper walking boots. We had no down jackets, no wet weather gear. We bought yak wool sweaters and beanies. And as we were walking up the pass, all these people were coming down looking absolutely deflated and defeated. The stories of the horror of how cold it was, and the pass was closed and they'd had frostbite. But we just kept going slowly, going, I wonder if we'll ever get to this, the beginning of the pass, never mind make our way over. So we were not very well equipped. And we're quite surprised we survived, to be honest. We both got really bad altitude sickness. There was no path, so we lost our way. The snow was really thick. But we both have, spirits that we would never quit on ourselves. So I guess we knew somehow we would keep going. And I think we learned there that we're always a lot stronger than we think we are. You can always go that next step. And if you don't stop, you will always get there. Yeah.
See, that puts you in a very unfair advantage, Mandy, because that's the kind of determination that a lot of people need to have, especially when you become an entrepreneur. And some people, would literally take a day off if they break a nail or maybe lose their eyelash, and you know what I mean, or their day is already ruined, and they put their phone on voicemail and call it quits.
Yeah, you are so right. And I have to say, and I'm going to say it, but here in Australia, something I have noticed is that, and no offense, this is a very general statement, but we're almost bringing up a generation of entitled people who don't have any oomph or don't have much grit, and they don't know what challenges and hardship are. And we live in a world of instant gratification. So yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think there could be so much said for people that are in trouble, or even teenagers, send them out to Africa or to India and go and do some community work or do a physical challenge, because that's where you'll see what life's all about and what you're made up of and what's important. Yeah.
Mandy, you speak like you've seen my household, and I kind of feel embarrassed having been one of those kids that was singing and dancing, Muzungu, Muzungu. And if you see my kids right now, you'll be surprised at stark difference, And the other day, I wanted to at least, pass on the message, and I was like, "Hey, finish your food. There's hungry kids in Africa." And you know what they told me, Mandy? They're like, "You're from Africa. You're not hungry." So, and
Sure. And it's perspective, isn't it? It's pretty hard to bring that when we live in a different world. But you know what? I'm sure you're doing amazing things with your kids, whether they say comments like that or not.
Absolutely. So you were obviously involved a little bit later on in your life in the travel industry and things of that nature. Tell us a little bit about, the
Yeah.
ins and outs of that too.
Yeah, so when I was in Zimbabwe, apart from the fact I had to get my brother to courier me a ticket to get out, before I could get in, I had to get a ticket out. So at the same time, my younger sister got married. And in those days, I decided, well, I wasn't going to do that. So I better go back to England for her wedding. So I went back to England, and I think I was the ripe old age of 26. And having spent several years traveling around the world, I sort of had a bit of a reality check. And I said, well, maybe I should find a proper job. So I looked at teaching or going into social work or retraining to be a teacher. And I stumbled into the travel industry. There was an advert for somebody, and they wanted someone who could sell Australia and New Zealand and Africa. And I went, well, I can do that. I just had a year in Australia and I've been to Africa. So I got the job on the spot, not surprisingly, and had the best time. We sold a lot of tickets to Australia and Africa, and small team, had a brilliant time. And I set up, I helped a colleague, and we set up another office together. So I did that for a while. And then the opportunity came from my boss, who spent 6 months in Australia and 6 months in England, to go. I told him I was leaving. I said, I need another adventure. I'm going to New Zealand, because I never got there yet. And anyway, long story short, I came out and I helped him set up an office in Sydney, which was a bit of a challenge. But then I moved up to Queensland and ended up with a job in a company that I'd heard about called Adventure World. So I was selling Africa and South America, Europe, really exciting destinations. So that's took me for a long time of being settled in many ways in the travel industry, which I loved. I used to travel every year, so it suited me very well.
Absolutely. You literally were getting paid to do what you love. And
I
that is
was blessed. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
in between all this fun, how did you find time to train for ultra distance triathlons and
Yeah.
especially Ironman World Championships in
Yeah.
Hawaii?
Well, interestingly, that came about from what I would have termed back then as a negative experience. I'd always liked to be fit. And when I settled in Brisbane, I told my then husband, I'm going to get fit now. So I was in the gym, and a girl had a T-shirt on and it said Tin Man Triathlon. And I said, I want to do one of them. And she said, well, there's a flyer over there. Anyway, I started doing triathlons and found I was quite good at distance, which made me realize why I couldn't sprint at school. I have more long twitch muscles. However, I had a very busy job, and I've always taken my work, a responsibility for my team and to do a really good job, as high achievers do. So I used my busy job as an excuse that I didn't really have time to train for an Ironman. So I kept putting it off. And then my current general manager at the time, we didn't have a great relationship, and I got a really, really bad appraisal. And I went, oh, I'm working really hard. So I thought, and they don't really value me. So that was the impetus. I went, you know what? I'm going to do my goal now. So it was the best thing ever, because I then made sure that I did have time to do the extensive training to train for a longer distance race and eventually, Ironman races.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's quite interesting. And the fact that you managed to do this and still participate. So many people just have an idea, maybe put it on a calendar and never take action. How important is it to follow through on any of the goals that you would have taken? Because you've also told us another goal of you climbing the Himalayas, even though you were ill-equipped for the activity.
Yeah. And I've always had a bit of a stubbornness and determination. When I want to do something, it's like no one's going to stop me. But the other thing that came with that experience at work and achieving is that if we don't do what we say we'll do, and we have these little dreams, not goals, we don't really feel fulfilled. Or I know I never did. We just feel we're letting ourselves down, which means you can't be totally fulfilled. So that was one reason. And the other reason was I didn't realize in those days, but I probably must have been a pretty good leader. I had a fabulous team of staff, and I would train early in the morning. And if I went out at lunchtime for a run, they would be perfectly fine holding the fort for me, because they were just such a great team of people. So they helped me very much. I was always there for them, always supported them, but they were really happy that I took that time out in the middle of the day sometimes and did my extra running and training. Yeah, so I was fortunate.
Absolutely. And in all these things, yes, it might seem or sound like you were just living your life, but there's an element of self-awareness that I'm starting to realize, because you wouldn't put yourself in such a position if that wasn't the kind of person that could, follow through with that sort of activity. What sort of training were you receiving, or is it something that was now just natural to you?
I think I've always had a natural thing about adventures and physical challenges. I mean, I don't do massive big ones now, but achieving has always been important. So I think I've always had that. And the thought of not succeeding in a physical challenge just doesn't really ring well with me. But I had a coach in my sporting days. I worked, I had a training group. So we had the camaraderie, we had a coach and a mentor. And that was really important to my journey, because the coach that you have or your mentors believe in you more than you do. I wasn't sure I had the training to do the first race in the south of France in Nice, because I had a break. But my coach believed in me and said, yes, of course you can do it. And then when it came to Ironman training, when I trained to go with another coach in another area, he believed in us all. So I think that's really helpful when you have other people that champion you, and you can see what we often miss within ourselves.
Absolutely, because I think they call it borrowed belief. You can borrow other people's belief in you and then use it up until your own belief catches up to that. Yeah. And that actually really helps you move forward. Now, you then obviously, based on the history that you've had, you transitioned from this 17-year career in the travel industry, and you founded Mindset for Success. And that was a significant shift. I mean, coming from a space where the world was your office and you were traveling, getting paid to do all of those things, starting your business is a whole different game ball. Yeah. Can you maybe let us know what that was like for you?
Yeah, sure. And that sort of happened by default. I was in travel and I loved it, but I always knew that there's more to do in life. And I've always been fascinated with people, from going through my travels and what makes people tick and why do some people have poor behaviors, all of that. And I didn't know what to do with it. So I started dabbling a little bit in personal development courses and lots of various and wonderful things, because I love to learn. And then not long after I competed in the Hawaiian Ironman, my body started to do some really bizarre things. My muscles were spasming back. And anyway, I couldn't ever really walk properly. Nobody knew what was wrong, but basically a physio said, you've got to stop doing this right now because I think you've got some big problems with your back. I didn't, but that journey was pretty devastating. And I went to all these experts and allied health professionals, and nobody knew what was wrong and nobody could fix me. And when you're an athlete, you just want to get fixed and get out there. However, having done some personal development and being reasonably aware, I realized that I had created this problem. So therefore, I had to find a way that was a little bit different to discreate it, because I've always taken responsibility. It might not always be our fault, but we have to take full responsibility. So that took me down a really weird and wonderful path of healing, completely selfish, only to heal me so I could get back on track. And along the way, I was also separated from a very, very unhappy marriage. And I couldn't understand how I'd ever, allowed myself to marry somebody that was an alcoholic and he tried to kill himself and all these things. So I then went to see somebody who told me that we all have these unconscious patterns, from our past of loyalty and responsibility. And she said, I know why you found it really hard to leave. And when she told me, I was so fascinated that how do we have these unseen powerful patterns in this thing called our subconscious mind? And I had to work as much as I could to ensure that I broke that pattern and I never repeated a pattern of my past. So along all the journey in the courses, I stumbled into neuro-linguistic programming, where we did an experiential technique to clear out a limiting belief. And I honestly got one of those light bulb moments, which I really thought only happened to other people. And I went, oh my goodness, this stuff works. And it was that moment that I went, I now know what to do with all my experience of leading teams of people in sales, and that this is what I have to do. I have to help other people how to discover their hidden patterns that are holding them back and how to clear them so they can break through and step up to the next level and live a happier, healthier life. It was that simple.
Absolutely. You know what I love about that is taking ownership, because, life happens for us, not happening to us. And so many of the things that are happening are, a product of our own sort of choosing in the way that we have decided to show up in that space. But for some people, if they make a good life, they want to own that I did that. But if the life is the opposite, they don't want to own that. And it's just crazy how that sort of, works out. And so many people find it very difficult to come to that conclusion. And obviously you've worked with diverse clientele and, from entrepreneurs to athletes. What are some of the common mental barriers that you maybe observe across these groups, even though they seem far from each other? And how do you sort of help them overcome them?
Yeah, and you're right that there are so many common threads that we all have. So I sort of documented, my findings, which I've put in my book, in some of them. And the number one thing that I see with a lot of my high achievers and athletes is that they are super hard on themselves. And when I say super hard, that means they're having these conversations with themselves with that little thought that says, oh, you're not good at that, you didn't do it well. They engage exactly as I did in a big battle. And all that does is minimize our personal power, causes stress and this never-ending drive that we've got to keep going. So that is probably the biggest challenge that I see in 90% of my clients. And unless you teach people how to change the voices in your head, a little bit more than just saying something better, it's really difficult because they become mental monsters. And then so many people don't know how to change it. They take it on as their identity and they go, well, I'm just not meant to do this or whatever. So that's the biggest problem that I see. Lesson 101.
Absolutely. And I can imagine as an athlete, there's that expectation of obviously, if you're not first, you're last. And that alone really puts people in a position that I didn't make it this time. So if you're maybe going to be doing something like the Olympics, you now have to wait 4 years for you
Yeah,
to actually have
yeah,
an opportunity. So you can only imagine,
yeah,
how the
yeah,
stakes are like for that. But
yeah.
in order for one to actually start changing or moving, they need to create certain habits. They need to actually follow through with, the way they live and the way they show up in the world. You've written a book about creating life habits. What's that all about?
Yeah, I wrote that book probably 5 or 6 years ago. I used to give my clients in the days gone by, maybe 7 years ago, a PDF to help them with tools and techniques to keep the change that I'd done with them in their work, which gave them simple tools and habits. So that was how the book came. I went, why don't I make it into a book rather than print out a PDF in the days when we did those things? So that's how that book came into being. And then more recently, I've been putting it into a new book, like an elevated version, where I've actually put the how to change. Because life is about habits, the foundation of our success. And what people don't know, there are three types of habits that we have to create. We have three intelligences or three brains: a head, which we all overuse, a heart, and a gut brain. So we need to get them all working together, because I've obviously trained in that too. So we have to have mental habits, which means I teach my clients how to let go of those negative voices, putting in positive statements to rewire, and championing themselves so that they start to think better in the beginning. Because, most people are high achievers. And then we must have habits of state, which we can manage our emotions or how we feel, how we interpret them, and whether anxiety cripples us. So that's the other area I teach people habits in, state management, because we can change that. And then obviously there's the physical habits of taking action towards your goals, planning your day, reviewing, making those calls that you might not want to do, or having those meetings you don't want to have. So it's based around those three areas, of mental, emotional, physical, clarity, consistency, and both of those together then we can create a bigger impact in our lives. Yeah, so it's about small steps. And I call it the ones that I start off with, I call them bookends. So I always say we've got to have one bookend in the morning, maybe two, which is always set an intention. The energy of the mind is attention. So where we place our mind energy in the morning will can determine the rest of the day. Set an intention and, connect with your why in the morning, and do a little bit of organizing for your day. And at the end of the day, it's reflecting on, your wins and championing yourself with your wins to build your inner sense of self-belief and confidence, and obviously gratitudes and many other things. But those are the basics, the bookends that I say to create first of all in your day. And they're simple.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that. It's like driving a car, right? You've got all these moving parts, and you got to be steering it, indicator to show other people where you're headed, and once you've got all of those things together, you also have to have the courtesy of checking maybe your blind spots to see if
Yeah.
you're not infringing on other people and things of that nature. But most people might not have all of those humming all at the same time. Is there something that can be
Yeah.
done to elevate that, because cars are fast?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I say to people often the first step to change, apart from you've got to want to, is awareness. And
Mm.
sometimes I say to people, they go, I'm not doing my morning rituals. I'm forgetting to catch myself when I speak negatively. I said, yeah, but every time you become aware is a win.
Okay.
So that's what I teach everybody. Just start observing yourself. One of the greatest things we can do as humans is we can imagine ourselves outside our bodies looking in, or up there looking down, or we can be in it. So because we can see ourselves from different perspectives, practice a bit of that in the day to just observe what you're doing with curiosity and kindness. Very important. So that's what anybody can do now, is just take a moment, instead of being so busy, come back to the present, take a couple of breaths and just observe what they've just done. or if they're in a conversation, try sort of being outside themselves, listening in to see, are they just repeating what they always say? You know, what drove that behavior and why they said what they did. So that in itself can be massively transformational, just self-awareness.
Now, I mean, that's all well, true and good, Mandy. And people will be looking at you thinking, she's trekked the Sahara. She's, done the Himalayas with not that much equipment. She's traveled the world. She knows a thing or two about life and lifestyle. Who am I? How am I going to be able to do this, etc., etc.? And so many people um have that self-doubt that I don't think or they don't trust themselves enough to be able to execute at that sort of level. And you've obviously achieved remarkable feats in sports and business. What sort of advice would you give to individuals that are struggling with self-doubt and maybe seeking to build unshakable confidence in themselves?
And the first thing I would say, it's normal if you doubt yourself and you feel anxiety. We're hardwired to be kept safe and comfortable. And if we have any fear of rejection, it's a horrible feeling. So if we can normalize that, it's completely normal that you have doubts. I had doubts. I still do. But I had massive doubts years ago. When I was at school, I couldn't speak up with going bright red. So we have to remember that everybody has their doubts, but when we're stuck in our own problems, that's all we see. So to get out of it, take that first step. I went and spent money on my personal growth. But in this day and age, you could transform your life if you put the effort into it by what is online for free, really. I mean, it's never as good as working with somebody, but just every day do something to build your belief. Watch videos on inspiring people. Listen to your shows. I mean, you're an inspiration. Plug yourself into the energy of possibility, potential, and positivity. And it will eventually rub off on you. And then take small steps. You don't have to have a goal to change the world, but it might just be in 6 months, I want to wake up feeling 20% happier. Well, do a small thing every day to work towards it. Your journey is unique, and we should never want to be like someone else. So we just have to focus on our path, do the best we can, and make sure you take small steps and plug yourself into positivity and potential.
But Mandy, I don't think you've seen how cozy my couch is and the blankets that are on it. You know what I mean? And every time I'm looking at Netflix, it only gives me 15 seconds to decide what I'm going to do with the rest of my day. You know what I mean? So, for some
we're
people,
brainwashed. People have I guess ultimately. And I say this because I learned throughout my years that I work better with people. They can be as stuck as they can be. They can be crippled up with anxiety when they're performing. But if they have that little seed of, I need help, but I do want to change, even though I'm terrified, I can work with it. But some people, and I realize it can happen through life's experiences, do have a bit of a victim mentality, and you cannot help somebody with that mentality to change. I've tried. That was my learning from my first marriage. So I guess on that level is, yes, our couches are comfortable. Mine's comfortable too, Prosper. So's binging occasionally on Netflix. But do we really wake up in the morning feeling fulfilled? Now, if we do, that's fine. But a lot of people don't. They have dreams and goals that they've given up on. So if they're not waking up feeling totally fulfilled, then just do something. Take a small step, join a class, find a new sport, dance, do the arts, learn a language. There's a world of opportunities, but we must unplug from our gadgets and not be brainwashed by all this commercialization and bad news, because that gets into people's brains and numbs everybody down a little, I believe.
Absolutely. Now, for those that are intrigued by your approach and maybe are looking to get started on their own journey, a little bit equipped this time, not climbing the Himalayas barefoot, what are the
Not recommended. no, don't
But
do that. Don't hitchhike through Africa solo either. I'm sure they're not a great thing to do, really.
absolutely. What are the initial steps that you recommend somebody takes in order to start reshaping their mindset to success and 100 points if they lead to what you're already doing and offering?
Cool. The first thing to do is hop onto my website, which is mindsetforsuccess.com.au. On there, I've got lots of resources. I have a free resource and lots of blogs, but I've also created a really, really, really inexpensive short course helping people to break a habit and create new behaviors, because that's the foundation of all our success. And because I want to reach more people, and not everybody has the funds to work with me one-on-one, I've put this course together, and at the moment, people that buy the course, it's $48, will also get a copy of my book Rewire when it's published, which is about $35. So it's a bit of a no-brainer. But if you don't want to spend any money with me, I've got lots of resources on my site. However, if you are intrigued, I've on my contact me, you can book a call and have a complimentary chat. No obligation, because we need to make sure we're a right fit. And I only take people that I know I can get them results, because I've done Ironman and we get across that finish line however we can. And I guarantee my results. So you've got to come on a journey with me.
Absolutely. And yeah, definitely. I'll make sure that all those links are in the show notes so that people can, seek their path and see if it is a fit for them to work
Thank
on
you.
that.
Yeah.
Now,
Thank
there's
you.
one thing that I've heard about, triathlons and events like Ironman is setting a date. Because once you set a date and you're going to be participating in this event at this particular time, things change. Whereas a
Absolutely.
lot of people just don't have a clear vision, they don't have a step-by-step plan, they don't have any compelling goals. They will do it when it's gonna come. And especially here in Australia, where there's a prevalent statement and they call it "she'll be all right, mate." You know what I mean? Like, everything is just gonna be okay. You know what I mean? We also have the same. You traveled in Africa, Hakuna Matata. It means no worries. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For the rest of
Yeah.
your day, you can just sit, drink and smoke, and tomorrow another day will come, and then we'll figure it out
Yeah.
then. So,
You're absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's why, well, I use a lot of sporting analogies in my work, because I say you have to make your goal as if it's your own Olympics. You have to put a date on it and you have to bring the urgency. And that can be hard when it isn't a competition or a specific date. But that's what I help my clients focus on, get so excited about it and put a date on it. Because as you say, when we've got a date on it, the urgency effect steps in, and we've got more of a focus. And I guess that's why athletes are so committed, because they have a much clearer pathway, times for dates, and a plan to get there. So we need to bring that into our lives, especially in the business worlds, and get much more strategic in many ways with how we approach it, I think, rather than, yeah, she'll be right, mate. A little bit of that. We have to have a bit of a balance. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, Mandy, I mean, obviously, just talking to you, it feels like you're only just getting started. What's next?
Oh, well, what's next for us? Well, what we're doing, two things. I was looking for a new sport, so probably everyone will go, oh, yeah, that's been around a while. I've just got into pickleball, which I love, not being a tennis player before, and of course, being competitive, I made a plan. So I'm very proud to say I did my first little competition, and with my doubles partner, Luke, and myself, we got a bronze medal. So we were super excited.
Wow.
So, and the only reason I got into pickleball is that in June, my husband and I are going to live overseas in Thailand for a year, as
Wow.
digital nomad. I'm going to work there still. And we discovered pickleball in Thailand last year. And the only reason I got into it back here is so I could be better when I went back to Thailand. So we're off to Thailand to live for a year, to do some travel as well. And I'll still be able to work, which is wonderful.
Absolutely. I mean, and I can't thank you enough for the time that you spend with us on the call. I mean, your life story and your experience and everything else that you have done have all culminated into this one, very expansive knowledge bank that people can tap into and actually learn how to be, do, and have a happier existence. And knowing what it is that you're allowing people to achieve and reach, I think you're literally giving people back to themselves. Because if somebody's just going to curl up on the couch and not do anything, and after having worked with you a little bit, then they now have a clear step-by-step plan. Everybody will be able to then go ahead and achieve their goals. So kudos to you.
And it's never too late. You know, I've worked with, over the years, people that have been seriously depressed. I don't specialize in it, but everybody's struggled, who've had, you know, treatment in hospitals, who've been at rock bottom, and they've transformed their lives. So it is possible. And I think that's why I'm so blessed that I live my passion every day, because I see these changes and it is possible. And sometimes we just need a little bit of help along the way.
Absolutely. I mean, you started off getting paid to travel, which is something that you love. And now you get to live your passion and get to play pickleball, you know, just absolutely. So many people will be looking at this and say, wow, wouldn't that be nice? And yes, it is possible, because if you've noticed, Mandy's, you know, really set it out that the path to success as much about mindset as it is about action. And obviously, her journey exemplifies the power of resilience, self-awareness, and the courage to embrace change. So if this story resonated with you, I want you to consider, you know, how her experiences would maybe help you look at how you're actually approaching your own life, and you can mirror that and see if the challenges you're facing cannot have a solution based on, you know, where she's been and the things that she can help you with, and see how adopting a mindset for success can actually lead to transformative outcomes. Now, Mandy, I can't thank you enough for the time we spent on the call today.
Thank you. It was my honor and privilege to be on your podcast. You're an amazing human being too, and I thank you very much for the opportunity.
Well, I appreciate that. So for those that are watching right now, make sure you look at for Mandy's website in the show notes. I will put all those results and all those links in the show notes so that you can make a decision for yourself. And you can also learn about her coaching services and the resources. But I want you to remember one thing: the journey to success begins with just a single step. Why not take yours today? Bye for now.